federal friends. Hopefully, you're doing well on this wacky Wednesday. And if you're watching this live, I would love a hashtag live, or if you're catching this on repeat, a hashtag repeat. And I know today there's going to be a ton of hashtag values because we have a special guest. We've got Ron Baranski Esquire, who has agreed to come on to talk little bit about estate planning and some of the things that we as federal employees face because we move around so much stateside and OCONUS, and what we can do to prepare to not pay taxes and well, as many taxes. We have to pay taxes or we go to jail, unlike some other people, federal employees are held to a higher standard. So, yeah. So, without further ado, thanks for joining us, Ron.
Hey, you're welcome, Heather. Thanks so much for having me on today. Uh, I know the weather out your way is probably different than here, but uh, I do want to say, my name is Ron Baranski, and I'm an estate planning attorney. I started work in a variety of practice areas and was licensed in 2003 in Texas. Uh, Starting about 10 years ago, I focused primarily on estate planning, and I would say that's my exclusive practice area now. Uh, at least 95% of what I do is estate planning. I, try and add in a little bit of contract review and business formation that comes along with that, whether corporate or LLC work. But yeah, my passion really started. I got cancer 10 years ago, and uh, I recognized my own mortality, and at the same time, uh, just come to realize how many people around me had no estate plan. And then it's surprising to me that I look it up on Google right now, and you'll find the number is 64 to 65% of Americans have no plan. And I have a little private Facebook group where I educate Texans on estate planning, and I polled them, and it was within 1 percentage point. I can't remember, 63, something like that. So, real surprising to me that people don't have a plan. But I get it also. We don't want to talk about our mortality. It's kind of like doing the taxes come April. Put it to the side, do it just when I have to. The only difference is we don't know what the date is. The date that event happens and everything changes for our family. So I do want to start out by saying I'm licensed as a Texas attorney, but I am not providing legal advice here. This should be deemed for general educational purposes. I say that because I simply can't advise people outside of the state of Texas. But many of the state planning laws are similar throughout the country, especially when you get to trust and other parts of estate planning. And I kind of want to clarify that so you know that, estate planning is more than a document, more than a will or a trust. It's planning. It's sitting down with an attorney that has seen the pitfalls that you might come through, seen the horror, of families that thought they had a plan, uh, and then something went haywire. And so that experienced attorney can bring that experience to bear on your estate plan and help you plan in a way that you avoid some of the pitfalls that I've seen and that others I talk to have seen throughout our time in practice. So estate planning is more about just writing a will or a trust. Uh, if it was that alone, I would tell you go to LegalZoom.com and knock yourself out. But it really comes back to experience and having the legal experience to put something together that meets the formalities of the state, uh, complies with that, and doesn't leave you trying to wonder if what plan I put together really does that and is legal. And the sad reality is you don't know until you're dead. So sadly, uh, and I know I get a little brutal sometimes, so don't let me be too much of a Dr. Doom. But one of my one of my real passions, though, is even if you haven't put a will, trust, any kind of plan together, there are two vital documents that you need. You need to have a durable power of attorney in place today. Uh, a durable power of attorney, and they may come under other names from state to state, but a durable power of attorney lets you name a trusted agent to step into your shoes and take care of your financial affairs if something happens. So if you get in a car accident tonight, you have an accident, maybe you're in the hospital for the next 6 or 8 months, then you know who's there, what's going to happen to your financial affairs. If you put a durable power of attorney in place, then that person can go in to your bank, can deal with your income taxes, can deal with a variety of things that relate to your property and to your money. Um, Second only to that is a medical power of attorney, because the same thing applies. You know, it's pretty common we think that well, our spouse will just immediately have that ability, and most times they will, but not all of us are married. I am, but not everybody listening today is married, and even those people sometimes have a certain maybe daughter that they want to help make their medical decisions. Now, the difference with a medical power of attorney is it doesn't take effect until you're no longer able to communicate your desires. So the durable power of attorney, way I draft them, it takes effect immediately. But the medical power of attorney takes effect when you can no longer communicate to your medical team what you want them to do. In Texas, we have a third document called uh, Healthcare Directive or Advanced Healthcare Directive. I jokingly call it the pull the plug document, but honestly, you need it because that document tied with your medical power of attorney lays out your wishes. Whether you wish to be maintained on artificial life support, uh, and you can check the box, yes, I want everything. Or you can check the box, no, that given everything medicine can do, if I'm going to die within 6 months anyway, I do not want to prolong my life being kept alive on ventilators or whatever it may be. So I tell people those are your two most important documents, and there's three. It kind of depends on the state. Just as important, though, is on that healthcare directive, make sure you tell your family, your close loved ones. So when dad shows up in the hospital, this event happens, one of the daughters doesn't walk in and say, "What are you doing?" You do everything you can to keep it. You can say, "No, hon, remember we talked about it. He wrote it down, he shared it with you." Because I'll be honest with you, even though you put that in writing, if one child comes in and screams loud enough, they're going to hook you up to everything they've got. Because the lawsuit, the liability from that lawsuit is much less than the liability from not complying with your healthcare directive. But that's kind of where my I get fired up some. But you know, we can bring it back down now to putting together a will. We've all heard of last will and testament. We've heard it on TV. read about it, whatever. And you know, uh, there's kind of a misconception that I run into a lot of times. We talk about probate, and I'll explain that in a minute. But we uh, we think that a will, you know, Dad went down to the attorney's office and he had a notary and two witnesses. Everybody watched him sign it. He brought it home, and maybe he told his kids, something happens to me, it's over in that box. You go pull it out. It lays out what to do. You guys split it up and go on your merry way. Well, that's not the case. A will has no legal effect until it has been in front of a probate judge. And that judge has deemed that it complies with those formalities of the state where he died. Uh,
Wow.
and that process, sadly, can run from, I'm going to say, $3,000 to $5,000 in Texas, and I'm going to say 15 to 30,000 in California. And I'm going to say Arkansas, 3% of your estate. So 3%, that's a pretty easy number. Let's say you have a home worth $500,000, and in today's economy, not hard to do. So you have $500,000 home, valued home, goes into probate, and hypothetically in Arkansas, that's $15,000 in attorney's fees. So
And that's
that
just the home.
that is without anyone challenging anything. That's without, you know, there are the cases where I need to disinherit Johnny because of whatever. Well, Johnny is going to probably come back and challenge things in court. He has nothing to lose, other than he's probably got to come up with $5,000 to $10,000 for his attorney. But if he can do that, then he can drag this thing out for hypothetically for years. Uh, and all the money your loved ones spend defending that, you know where that comes from. That comes from the estate. So there are some tools we use in estate planning, and I just say tools because it's back to that plan again. What tool fits this need? And it's my job to find out what is my client's biggest fear, what's their objective, what are they trying to accomplish, and how do I get there? And
Yep.
so, even if I'm doing a simple will-based plan, I'm doing it in a way where we plan to try and avoid probate if at all possible. We set up bank accounts with having them titled in a certain way to bypass probate, insurance proceeds, life insurance proceeds that bypass probate, uh, title on a home can be set up in a different manner. So there's a lot of things we do there in the plan.
Hmm.
But then a really flexible tool we have is a revocable living trust. You probably heard of those. You know, it's the John Doe Family Living Trust or
Hmm.
something of that nature. You can call it whatever you want. I have a client actually that wanted to call hers the Second Chance Trust because she didn't even want people knowing her name. Uh,
Yeah.
but you know, for some, it's difficult sometimes to picture a trust, and I kind of I may be a little simple here, but for me, I take a little red wagon in my head. I picture the little red wagon you pull around when you're a kid, and I think it said
Hmm.
radio flyer on it. You
Yep.
pull that around, you put your toys in it, and those are your toys. Nobody else getting them, especially when you're about 3, 4 years old. Those are mine. The key word is mine. I have a couple of three grandsons now, so I know that word. Uh, anyway, you pull that wagon around and use the handle, and you take it where you want it to go. You're in
Hmm.
charge of it. You direct it.
Yep.
Anything inside that wagon bypasses probate. Take something out of the wagon, then we're back in probate. So let's picture tools being or toys being homes. or real estate. We put all of those into the trust. Then the
Mm.
trustee, uh, I'm just going to say myself here, I drag the wagon along, take it where I want to go. But if I become incapacitated, then I have a successor trustee who could be my daughter that would pick up the handle, take off as though nothing happened. And I don't want to be rude or frank, but the trust doesn't care if you have passed on or not. It's set up to continue, and just the succession continues. Now,
Yeah.
this works for incapacity. If you if you set it up and you become incapacitated, well, typically a married couple, the spouse is going to be the backup. You know, they're going to take care of that. But once one of those is gone, then we always have successor trustees below them that they can step in and take over at that point. And so all of the real property issues that are in the wagon,
Mm-hmm.
all of the bank accounts. Now, we do not put any qualified funds into a trust. There's reasons for that. They already avoid probate, and we can disrupt some tax savings if we did that. But
All right.
for everything else, if we can package it and put it in the trust, then that successor trustee doesn't even have to argue with the bank about their power of attorney because they're already named as a trustee for this account that was set up.
Nice.
Then you got other options. You can either say that at the time, and I'm just going to use a couple here, at the time my wife and I pass, we want everything distributed to our three children, one third each. Or you can lay out a written memorandum that says, I want my shotgun to go to Jimmy, and my wife's ring to go to Sally. Uh, but another option is if you have troubled children, I just
Mm-hmm.
say troubled, uh, maybe you have a child that's not good with money, you can set up what's called a spendthrift provision, and you can control that for years and years. You can have your trustee set up to provide an allowance, basically, or to simply just provide for their health, education, and safety, and not any kind of money just handed out to them.
Yeah.
I would say that it can be very surprisingly damaging to young adults if you drop $1 million in their hands. And I had a client I checked on with my financial planner friend. He
Mm-hmm.
did pass away 2 years ago. I said, how'd it go? He had kids 24, 29, and like 30. And I said, are they are they spending? He said, oh, yeah. They're spending like there's no tomorrow. He said, it'll be wiped out within another probably year. He said, one of them's in jail now. He said, they're messed up. So you can damage somebody by just throwing this in their lap.
Yeah.
So there's got to be a lot of thought put behind what you want to do with it. The other troubled child is maybe a drug addicted child, and you can have you can have a trust set up so for that child everything ceases in the trustee's sole discretion when he thinks they're on drugs.
Mm-hmm.
But the trust can pay for rehab, and then the trustee can demand that once a month they do a drug test for the
Yeah.
next year, and then after that year, continue on paying them. You can also skip your kids, and you could go to your grandkids with everything. Because I deal with people sometimes in their mid late 70s, and their kids are grown up. They're already uh, have a career. They have the money they need, and they have uh, you know younger teenage grandkids, and they want to pass that to the grandkids, but they do want those conditions in there so that if maybe one of them became drug addicted, this could happen. This could
Yeah.
control it. or if one was had a spending problem, this
Yeah.
could control it. Or let's say that same person gets sued, they can't get to the trust money if it's a spendthrift provision in there. Or if they
Yeah.
file bankruptcy, the bankruptcy trustee can't come take their portion of the trust out.
Oh,
So there's
that's
a lot of things that we consider when we're putting them together, but uh, that's one of our most flexible vehicles, and you'll find that probably more likely used throughout the country uh, than somebody actually working on just a will plan because of probate cost, the privacy. Because do note that when you go to probate, everything becomes public record,
yeah.
and your trust continues private and bypasses probate, and your trustee just does what you told them to do. Uh, so that's kind of where most of my practice is, and most of what I do. Every person is different. I try and do something. Everything I do is specialized, just based on that client. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so it really depends on what that client desires are, their objectives, where they're at financially, and what they want to do with their money. Uh, and once I know that, then I can start drawing a plan out to make it happen.
Yeah. So,
What questions has that maybe brought up for you?
well, I'm just like glad there's different ways to protect children who might not be that responsible, ways to just give it to the grandkids instead. But
Right.
I had no idea that probate was that expensive. So,
Yes, I did I did a similar interview in California a few months ago, and the lady there actually was a realtor among other things, and she sold people's homes that had been in probate. She assisted uh, the executor in selling the home, and
mm,
she was the one that brought this dollar amount up to me for California, or I wouldn't have known. And on top of that, she said it'll be 12 to 18 months before you see one nickel in California. Uh, Again, like I said, Texas is a little different. It's pretty quick and easy in Texas, but all around me, it's pretty difficult. And most of the states I have interacted with have a fairly difficult probate system.
oh, I'm sure Hawaii, whatever California does, Hawaii is the little twin of
Right.
California. So ours is probably a nightmare too. But one thing that happens a lot with federal employees is we wind up moving around a lot. Like me, I went from New York to Germany to Italy to Kansas City and Leavenworth, Kansas, and then finally Hawaii. I mean, I sold my property in Missouri before I moved out here, but if
Okay.
I moved to a place that wasn't so expensive, I probably would have rented that out and started a
Right.
stream of income. So, what advice do you have to people who have multiple properties from moving around stateside? And then we can talk about
Okay.
overseas because that you were telling me that's a whole different bucket of worms.
Yes. Uh, a trust perfect vehicle again for dealing with that kind of situation where you have properties maybe scattered around the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
You deed all of those back to the trust. So the trust is actually the owner. Uh, and now, as I mentioned, I didn't go into detail, but it's a
Mm-hmm.
revocable living trust. So if at some point you want to amend it or change it, you retain those powers as long as you're alive. But yes, you would take hypothetically if I had somebody here in Texas and they had property in I'm going to say uh, Illinois, California, in Oklahoma, I would actually have to pay an attorney in each of those states to draft a deed, deeding that property from you, Heather, to you, Heather, as trustee of the Heather Living Trust. From that moment on, the trust would be in control of that property. And so, even though typically in probate, you would take on a separate probate case in every state where you had real property. So,
Mm-hmm.
you can imagine how uh, complex that could get. If you had, 4 or 5 properties around the country, you're going to open one where you died, and then you're going to have to restart kind of, we'll call it a mini probate in each of those states.
Wow.
So a trust more than covers that, and just the minimal fees to get that set up kind of pay for itself. It truly becomes an investment. When you sell financial investments, you talk about, return on income.
Mm-hmm.
The return on income can be 5 and 10 fold when you set a trust up, put your property in it, and don't have to deal with probate or probate in other states. That even magnifies that cost. And most of all, think about this, people are dealing with this at the most tragic time in their life. They're having to deal with attorneys, with probate, with cost, finding papers, and all of that stuff. And I tell people, a lot of my clients in Texas, honestly, it's about a break even. You pay about what it costs to do a trust as you would to do a simple probate. But I have a lot of clients that say, I just want to pay it now. I want to pay $3,000, $4,000, get a trust put in place, and then my kids don't have to deal with any probate. Don't have to go to any courts. Uh,
Yeah.
Now that number I throw out is going to vary based on the complexity of whatever your estate looks like. But I will say that no matter how complex your estate is, it's still going to pay you multi times the amount at least will be returned to your family and your estate, or it will save that amount when you die and when your property either goes to probate or bypasses it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I was wondering, like, what if you put so while you're alive, what if you put those homes into an LLC to protect yourself from being sued if something happens? Can those LLCs go into your probate as well? I mean, into your trust?
Yeah, they can. They're set up in a specific way. And you brought up liability, so I'm going to just kind of jump in there a little bit. If you happen to have a rental property, like you was talking about, maybe you had held your property in Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
If you place that in an LLC, then the liability stops with that LLC, meaning that if you have $100,000 or $5 million in a bank account over here, but you get sued related to something that happens at this home,
Mm-hmm.
that's as far as it goes. As long as you have not commingled funds. So basically, you took the rent checks and put them in the LLC account. You
Mm-hmm.
paid for the AC repair out of that account. You just followed the rules,
Yeah.
and you are protected. And I actually have some people that actually they set up 7 rental homes. They got 7 LLCs. The problem there is making sure each of them doesn't get intermingled. It can be
Oh,
confusing. But yes, you would set it up as a typical LLC, but then in the operating agreement inside the LLC, you would make a provision for who the members are of the LLC, and you would bring the trust into being the owner of that LLC. Now, the trust doesn't, this type trust doesn't give you asset protection. What I mean by that, a lot of people on the internet are always talking about put your money in trust, nobody can get at it. There's even some crazy ones out there saying if you do my self-study course and put your trust together, not even the IRS can touch you. You're tax-free from now on. Yeah,
Yeah.
when I heard that, I knew that was way out there,
Yeah.
uh, not
Good.
based on any legal reality I've seen. Uh, but yeah, if you follow the rules, you're fine. Uh, you put them in the trust in a proper way, you're covered. Asset protection is kind of a whole different story. That's where you talk about putting funds into a irrevocable, a non-revocable trust. And there's a place for those. But people will put money into a trust that they no longer own, they no longer control, to avoid lawsuits. Uh, I was about to say doctors, but it could be anybody. There's a whole lot of rich people out there that uh, maybe they've started a wonderful company, whatever it may be. They have obtained wealth, and they don't want to just be a target for somebody to come after that. So
Oh,
we
yeah.
kind of call that asset protection, not so much estate planning.
Whole different session.
You correct. Uh, you mentioned something. Oh, was it holding properties
Yeah, a
outside
lot
the
of
U.S.?
yeah, a lot of federal employees, at least when I was in Germany, they used their housing allowance to buy property in Germany and they've held on to it. Like, does that fit into a trust as well? Or how do they prepare that? Or should they be all selling their overseas holdings when they're on their deathbed?
Well, I'm glad that you at least alerted me to that question so I could look at it because I haven't in the past, and so I went and looked at it, and there's as you would guess, there's a Hague Convention and the treaties that have been signed, and then there's another one with the EU where they're trying to streamline things. There's one that I think 21 states out of the 50 in the U.S. has agreed to recognize these other wills. And I specifically went and looked at Germany, and Germany will typically recognize a will from here if it's valid in the place you died. If it was valid there, they will likely deem it valid, but no guarantees. And they don't even recognize a trust. A trust is not an entity that they use. A
Mm-hmm.
trust can't hold property. Uh, there could be some. What I would do is if I had a client that had holdings in Germany, I would contact an estate planning attorney in Germany, and he and I or she and I
Mm-hmm.
would work out a plan that didn't uh, conflict with each other, so they worked in unison, but still accomplished the goals that the client had. I
Mm-hmm.
looked at Germany, and it was interesting that even if you willed everything away, if I read it right, your spouse gets her share, your kids get their share, irrelevant of where you wanted it to go. So it's a unique, and you got a whole bunch of countries over there, the small countries. I say that being in Texas, I count everything small. But,
Yeah.
you got a whole variety of laws to deal with, much like throughout the U.S., where you have 50 different states, and every one of them has a little different uh, technique for probate and maybe a little different formality for the most part, it is true that if you have a will that's valid and legal where you die, or when you executed it, it was valid in
Yeah.
Arizona, I'll say, but you die in Texas, then it's going to be deemed valid in Texas in most all cases. Uh, so the U.S. you can get a little more of a general application to things versus overseas.
Yeah.
Uh, I would be concerned because some of the countries I read about it, they don't actually even do probate. It just automatically goes to these known heirs. And then you do have taxes.
Mm-hmm.
Now in the U.S., we have right now it's at 12.9 million is exempt from estate tax. And if you're married, double that.
Yep.
But at the end of 2025, if Congress doesn't act, then it drops to 6 million. So it's 6 for an individual, 12 for a couple. But overseas, you'll be taxed at a higher rate in some countries. So
Yeah.
I hope that answers a lot of your questions. I kind of ran a little longer than I hoped to.
Oh, that's great. All this information was really valuable. I want to thank you for taking the time out to
Oh
talk
yeah,
to the group. Again, put hashtag value if you found value in this. I did invite Ron to the group, so he's in here. You can make comments, he'll see them. I will put a link to his calendar in the comments too if you'd like to sit with him. Um, Ron, if someone's not located in Texas, can you help them find somebody?
oh
Not
yeah,
in Germany, but across the US.
yeah. I'm in a group with I think last count there was about 4,300 estate planning attorneys nationwide, and
Mm-hmm.
it's pretty common for us to reach out. I need a closest city and state. If I have that, I can reach out and I can get two or three attorneys typically that their focus is primarily just estate planning. I would say you want to avoid attorneys that do divorces, bankruptcies, estate planning, personal injury. Uh, if their list has about 10 different things they do, then they don't do any of them real good.
Yeah,
So
it's like you don't go to an endocrinologist if you're having a heart attack.
exactly. So look for an estate planner that minimum 5 years, but look for somebody maybe it's 10 years plus in estate planning. If anyone wants to DM me or even just put it in the comments, I'll reach out to them and I will get them 2 to 3 names of estate planners in the closest city and state that they're in.
Perfect. Well, thank you for everything, for going
Oh, you're
over this
welcome.
information, for being available for the federal employees in this group. And who knows, if the government shuts down this next week, they might have lots of time to call you, Ron.
I know.
So,
Thankfully,
uh,
we can hopefully count on that. All those usually get paid back.
yeah, yeah.
Hopefully, it's a
Actually,
paid vacation.
yeah, fingers crossed. Actually, I think they might have punted it down to November. So,
Oh,
right around the holidays, it's
perfect.
always wonderful to have that going on. But I think they extended it for a month because they knew they didn't have enough time to pull it all together. But, they had all year. That's what
I think
people tell me. You had
I
all
think
year to get this done. What do you mean you're doing your taxes on April
exactly.
10th?
If you just put a budget together, you wouldn't even need to do this, you know.
Yeah.
But I don't think we've been able to do that for the last decade or longer
No. So,
at the
well,
federal level.
what we can do is get your trust put in place
You
so
can.
that'll be taken care of before the worst happens. So,
Oh, absolutely. If I happen to be talking to anybody though that's sitting in that spot of more than 6 million but less than 12, talk to your estate planning attorney sooner than later, because there are ways to shield that money from estate taxation should that occur in 2026. Uh, because like I said, in 2025, it goes from 12.9 million to 6 million. And, you know, who knows, but there's maybe some people listening that have that as an issue.
oh yeah, there's a lot of very wealthy people who have managed to put a lot in their
Oh,
TSPs in here. You hear
right.
about TSP millionaires all the time. So, you know, if you're listening and you have that much cash, let's protect it. Uncle
Absolutely.
Sam has enough. Give it to your family, give it to your friends, give it to the Humane Society.
Exactly. Exactly.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Ron, and hopefully people will be on your calendar.
Hey, I'd love to talk to people. Uh,
All right.
I'll connect them with somebody they can connect with if I can't do it myself. Thanks, Heather. Have a
Thanks.
great evening.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
Aloha, everybody.